Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a topic that is quite literally the root of Indian society and its economy, agriculture. We're going to explore how this ancient practice has evolved to feed a modern nation of well over 1.4 billion people. So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll kick things off with the big picture, why farming is just so central to everything. Then we'll zoom in on the different ways it's done, the seasonal cycles, and finally, we'll get to know the major crops that end up on our plates. All right, let's jump right in. Because here's the thing. To really get a handle on modern India, you have to understand its connection with the land. It's a relationship that stretches back thousands of years and truly forms the bedrock of the entire country. I mean, just think about that question for a second. It's massive, right? You're talking about huge logistical, economic, and social challenges, and the answer, really, doesn't start in some high-tech lab or on a stock market floor. It starts in the soil with millions of farmers. Let that number sink in. Nearly half of India's entire population is involved in agriculture in some way, shape, or form. That makes it the country's largest employer, by a long shot. This isn't just another industry. It's a way of life for hundreds and hundreds of millions of people. So, its importance really rests on these three massive pillars. First, like we just said, it provides jobs on a scale that's hard to even imagine. Second, and this is the most obvious one, it guarantees food security. Simple as that. No farms, no food. And third, it's the launchpad for so many other industries. I mean, think about it. The cotton for your clothes, the sugar in your coffee, the rubber for tires, it all starts on a farm. Okay, so not all farming is the same. Just like India itself is incredibly diverse, so are the ways people farm. These methods can range from practices that have been passed down for centuries to highly modern, massive commercial operations. So let's start with two types of what we call subsistence farming, where the main goal is simply feeding your own family. On one hand, you have primitive subsistence farming. Picture a small family using very simple tools, working with the rhythm of the monsoon and the natural fertility of the soil. But then you have intensive subsistence. The land is still small, but now there's immense population pressure. The goal here is to squeeze every last drop of produce out of that land, using irrigation, fertilizers, whatever it takes. A perfect example of that primitive style of farming is something called slash and burn, or jumming as it's known in Northeast India. It's a very old, cyclical method, often practiced by tribal communities, and it's built entirely around migration and letting nature heal itself. So, how does it work? Well, a community picks a patch of forest, they clear it, and then they burn the vegetation. That ash acts as a fantastic natural fertilizer. They'll farm that spot for a couple of years until the soil starts getting tired. Then they just pack up and move to a new patch, leaving the old one empty. This gives nature years, sometimes decades, to come back and replenish everything, making it totally sustainable if the population is low. Now, this gets to the absolute heart of intensive farming. The big driver here is something called the right of inheritance. See, land gets divided with each generation. A farm that was once big enough for one family might get split between two kids and then their kids. The plots of land get smaller and smaller, but the families get bigger, creating this unbelievable pressure to produce more and more from less and less. And that brings us to the third phase of farming, commercial farming. Here, the whole mindset just flips. This isn't about survival anymore, it's a business. The one and only goal is to make a profit by selling what you grow. The signs of commercial farming are pretty clear. You're talking about huge operations, big money invested in things like high-yield seeds and chemical fertilizers, and a lot of machines, tractors, harvesters, the whole nine yards. Plantation agriculture is a perfect example of this, where a single crop like tea, coffee, or rubber is grown over a massive area, almost like a factory floor. Okay, now let's talk about the calendar that governs all of this. Because farming in India isn't just some random year-round thing. It follows a very clear rhythm, a kind of dance with the climate that's dictated by the monsoon and the changing of the seasons. And you know what? There's a super simple way to remember this rhythm. All you have to do is think back to your school days. The agricultural calendar in India pretty much mirrors the academic year. This lays it out perfectly. First, you have the Kharif season. Think of this as the first term of school. It kicks off in June, July, right when the monsoon arrives. These are crops that love water, like rice and cotton. Then comes the Rabi season. This is like your final exam term.
It starts in the cool, dry winter, and it's for crops like wheat and mustard. And in between, you have a short little season called Zaid, which is basically your summer break. It's when you grow quick crops like watermelons and cucumbers.
So now that we've got the seasons down, let's meet the stars of the show. We're going to start with the two most important food grains in India. These are the absolute staples that form the base of millions and millions of meals every single day. First up, we have rice. For the majority of India's population, especially in the south and the east, this is the #1 staple food crop. Now, rice is a classic kharif crop, and that tells you pretty much everything you need to know. It loves hot and humid weather, and more than anything, it is thirsty. It needs a ton of water. That's why you see it growing all over the plains in the north and northeast, and especially in the coastal areas and river deltas where water is never a problem. And this explains exactly why these states are the rice powerhouses of the country. Places like West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu have the perfect climate and water resources. In fact, in some of these places where there's enough irrigation, farmers can grow 2 or even 3 crops of rice in a single year. Okay, now let's switch gears and talk about wheat. This is the second most important cereal crop, and it's the main staple in the northern and northwestern parts of the country. And its needs are basically the polar opposite of rice. As a classic rabi crop, wheat's timing is perfect. It gets planted in the winter because it loves a cool growing season, but then it needs bright, clear sunshine when it's time to ripen and be harvested in the spring. It also needs way less water than rice. This makes the huge northern plains, like the Ganga-Sutlej Basin, absolutely perfect for growing wheat. And this profile explains why the map looks the way it does. The big wheat-producing states are Punjab, Haryana, and Uttar Pradesh, what people often call the wheat belt of India. They've got the perfect combination of cool in winters, sunny springs, and great irrigation to bring in a massive wheat harvest every year. But wait, the story of India's grains doesn't just stop with rice and wheat, not even close. There's this other incredibly important group of crops known as millets. You might hear them called coarse grains, but honestly, that name really doesn't do them justice. These are seriously tough, resilient crops. And while some people might call them coarse, their nutritional value is off the charts. We're talking packed with stuff like iron, calcium, and fiber. But their real superpower is that they can grow in really dry regions with poor soil and very little rain, places where a crop like rice wouldn't stand a chance. The 3 main millets you'll find in India are jowar, bajra, and ragi. Jowar is actually the 3rd most important food crop in the whole country. Bajra does great on sandy soils, which makes it perfect for a state like Rajasthan. And ragi is just a nutritional champion, loaded with iron and calcium, and it grows well in dry spots all across the south. And we can't forget maize, or corn, as many of us know it. It's such a clever crop because it pulls double duty on the farm. The corn itself is food for people, but the rest of the plant, the stalk, the leaves, gets used as fodder to feed livestock. It's a kharif crop that likes moderate temperatures and does really well in those old fertile soils you find in states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. All right, for our final section, we're going to move beyond the grains and look at the other essential crops that are just fundamental to Indian food and the economy. Let's start with pulses, lentils, chickpeas, beans, all that good stuff. India has this totally unique position on the world stage. It is both the world's biggest producer and the world's biggest consumer of pulses. For a huge vegetarian population, they are the main source of protein. They're absolutely essential. But here's the really cool thing about pulses. Most of them are what you call leguminous crops, and they have this incredible, almost magical ability. They can pull nitrogen right out of the air and fix it in the soil, which helps restore its fertility. It's why farmers love to plant them in rotation with other crops. It's like a natural way to heal the land. Next up, we have sugarcane. This is a tropical crop through and through. It loves hot, humid weather. It also takes a lot of work and has a really long growing cycle. It's in the ground for almost a full year. India is the 2nd biggest producer in the world, right after Brazil. And sugarcane is what gives us sugar, jaggery, and so much more. And finally, let's talk about oilseeds. This is a huge category of crops. Groundnut, mustard, soybean, sunflower, you name it. The most obvious use, of course, is for making cooking oil, a staple in pretty much every kitchen. But they're also crucial raw materials for industry, used to make everything from soaps and cosmetics to paints and ointments. And that brings us to the end. We've covered a ton of ground today, from the massive economic scale of farming all the way down to the individual crops. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. Every single thing on your plate has a story that started in a field. And understanding that story connects us not just to our food, but to the land and the millions of people who